With their hips, and then their hips shoot up, and then they start moving the barbell. It may sound counterintuitive, but what we want to do is so you're trying to really kind of squat the bar, but the bar doesn't move until your hips are about here anyways. So we're going to go ahead and put people right about that spot anyways, because everything else is just wasted movement. And oftentimes when you start to lift 90% and above, all that you running into that bar is going to do is just jostle the bar all over the place and putting you in a bad position as you're trying to stand up with it. So trying to get in a much better position to kind of start with, and that's going to, we're still getting our hips kind of under our shoulders, still kind of keeping that rule. We're not going to put anybody here, but you don't necessarily need to be straight up, specifically in the conventional deadlift.
Yeah, I need a bar.
In the sumo deadlift, you got to get your chest up a little bit more to make that make a little bit more sense. I would say past that, I saw a couple people who arms are bending at the top. Usually what that's indicative of is that your hips are usually weak, and or you have some mobility issues kind of in the front of your hip, whether it's quad, hip flexor. So if we start to kind of stretch and roll those things out, get your hips a little bit better, then you'll take away from that. Because all you're trying to do, instead of locking out, you're trying to bend your arms to kind of get that up a little bit higher. In the deadlift, we want our arms to kind of hang like strong hooks, and then we're just going to kind of complete the deadlift like so. So I saw a couple of those. Anything else you saw? Oh, we have a question. Yes, Mr. Bell.
What would I do if my hips shoot up in a deadlift first? We see that a lot.
Right. So that's going to be one of the more common faults or mistakes that we see. And what we're going to try and do to correct that is usually a couple times it can be stance width. Moving our stance in corrects that because it forces us to use our legs a little bit more all throughout the motion. That was also another cue that I gave you. You did a really good job of being able to push your legs through the whole movement, opposed to going to lockout and then trying to use your hips, trying to involve everything for as long as we can all the way to the top. But in general, that's going to mean that your lower back is really, really strong because you're going to try and dump everything into your lower back and then kind of almost do a good morning with that up. So we got to think of it, what can we do to kind of correct that? And that's going to be more than anything is just strengthening our legs. So, close stance, high bar box squats, free squats, lunges, single leg stuff, leg press, anything that we can do to where you're going to be forced to use your legs through. I had a lifter, Lori Smith, who successfully deadlifted over 407 at 150 pounds or so, or whatever she was weighing a couple different times. But she was such a hardhead about all this stuff that I made her lift on a deficit until she could, to break her of that habit. So lifting on a deficit is you're standing on like 1 or 2 inches, and that's going to force you down in this position to use your legs for a much longer time. So I would literally have her warm up until about 80% of that, take that out, and then let her deadlift again from there. And that kind of broke her from kind of kicking her legs up like so and really starting to involve her legs. She had incredibly strong legs. She just didn't know how to feel them underneath her in the deadlift sometimes. So that's why, when we're talking about how to do things in the conjugate method, when we're going to go ahead and put you on a deficit or put the weights on blocks, we're putting you in different positions and forcing you to figure out how to work through them. And a lot of time they're in really awful, bad positions to be in. But if you're strong in those positions, when we get up to that 90%, you're going to automatically get into some really squirrely positions. So you learn how to fight your way out the strongest and most efficient way that you can.
Try to find the positions that you're weak in, and then from there, just make shit up on how you're going to attack that. Years ago, when I was going through the process of trying to figure out how to have at least one successful squat done in a competition without looking like I was throwing up in a toilet every single time, because I would go over like this every single time I came up out of the bottom of a heavy squat. While I was working through that process and while I was trying to figure that out, it was really simple on what to do. And I started to think about this lifting style that I called lifting like shit. I would get myself in bad positions on purpose. We would do heavy good mornings with tons of chain weight. We would do heavy deficit deadlifts. We would do pause squats. Maybe you do a box squat and you sit on the box for like 10 seconds and then try to squat back up. Or we used to even just squat out of the chains, and we'd put the weight in the weight would be suspended by chains in the rack, and we'd squat the weight up, But then when we start back over, we'd let the weight rest in the chains for like 10 seconds and then try to push it back up again. So you lose all your tightness and you lose that stretch reflex. And so when you're thinking about like where you're weak, you can get advice from us, but you can literally make it up. You can be like, oh, I'm kind of weak in that position. Well, if you just hang out in that position more often, you'll be better at it. Makes some sense, right? We had a few people ask some questions, and Seema, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating. This is a deadlift that I guess I would just call like a floating deadlift. Ed Cohn taught this to us years ago here at SuperTraining. And all you're really trying to do in the case of a sumo pull, or either pull actually, but in the case of a sumo pull, we're just trying to get the weight to float off the ground. Tiny Tiff demonstrated that. That's how tight she's trying to get for her lift, for the lifts that she was doing here earlier. But this is something that you can implement into your training anyway, because a lot of you don't have a great understanding of where your hips should be, and you don't have a great understanding of how tight you should be getting all the time. So you could do, 4 sets of 4 or 5 sets of 5 utilizing this technique, and this would be something that would really transfer over really well into your strength when you're actually doing a heavier deadlift, and something that will keep you from doing that 2-part lift where you end up using all lower back because your butt shot up. So here's a sumo pull with a little bit of that floating technique. We're just going to try to force the knees out, get ourselves tight, and get in position. And it's that simple. And so he's addressing like, maybe I suck from this position. Every time I go to pull the weight off the ground, I end up in a different position than I want my body to be in. Well, force yourself to go through these hard and difficult positions that you maybe suck at, and you'll be able to work your way through that. Another way of doing that is, if I can have you come up. This guy is 11,000 feet tall, and so when someone's that tall, it can be an advantage in some ways, because a lot of times when someone's that tall, they might have better leverages in a sense, but they also might have worse leverages, or they just have more shit to think about. It's just more confusing and harder to organize your body when you're this tall. So on a conventional deadlift, what I was recommending to him is that you do you go back and forth between a stiff leg deadlift and a regular deadlift. And this is going to, again, teach you where your hips are. You could do this sumo, you could do this conventional. For the sake of just showing, he's demonstrating, he's just going to do a conventional pull.
And this is one of those things where, it's something that's just really brilliant, because we can tell you guys to be tight. We can tell you guys to push your hips back. We can tell you all these things, but this is going to force you to feel that. It's going to be, regular deadlift, good. Now he's going to come down, and now he's going to do a stiff leg deadlift. So he's going to keep his hips there. And he's going to understand where his hips are relative to his knees, relative to the bar. And it's going to be one of those learning processes that you can help figure out something for, a piece of the whole puzzle with someone through just some accessory deadlifts.
And if you kind of saw as he was going, like his hips didn't even really look like they were in that different of a position, right? And so maybe for you learn like, wow, I just really suck at moving my hips. They don't move that much from a stiff leg deadlift to a regular deadlift. And maybe that's not problematic for you. Maybe you can still continue to make a lot of progress that way. But I'd say for most of you, it probably would be a problem that would rear its ugly head somewhere along the lines.
I also got a question from someone asking about, how do you choose conventional or sumo, which stance? And the powerlifter in me is going to tell you whichever one you lift the most weight with, right? That's the one that you choose because that's the right answer. But you should be doing both, right? Like I was talking about the 3 deadlifters that we brought here, they're going to only deadlift their competition stance once a month heavy. Okay, and they're practicing everything else the other way. So we're putting them in bad positions, and we're forcing them to get good at a conventional deadlift. Jeremy came in with about a 400 or 500 pound conventional deadlift.
Damn.
Maybe, right? And now it's he's actually pulled a 750, I think, conventional. So it was one of those things where if you look at lifts across the board, right, and one is really, 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 really low, that's super low-hanging fruit and super easy to kind of start to correct. You start to do that lift more, and that's kind of the basement. That's the floor of your strength. When you raise that floor up, your house on top gets a hell of a lot bigger. Does that make sense? So all my athletes are going to pull both sumo and conventional. And I know everyone's getting to the point where they're going to have to almost start to make a decision on which to use. If we do things right, I've actually had a couple people convert from sumo to conventional and from conventional to sumo because we've worked on it so much and they figured out the position or how to be tight or how to keep their feet or how not to kind of kick into a straight leg deadlift. And this has helped them progress past their old PR and what they thought was their dominant stance. But you have to be able to do both, and it'd be great if you could do it efficiently or very, very well. But that's why we always kind of program that there, is just to make sure that we're doing both. And, it'd be ideal, if we can get you within about, 20% of what your dominant stance is to your non-dominant stance. That's going to be about where everything is really, really strong. And then from there, it's going to be nitpicking and kind of putting other stuff in there.
How many people in here write down their workouts or follow some sort of specific programming? And then how many people are actually writing down whether you used a hip circle or whether you went on a treadmill for 5 minutes to warm up? Anybody tracking anything like that? So maybe a few people, right? While I was at Westside Barbell, some of the stuff that we did was such commonplace. It was so much commonplace as, saying, hey, here's your workout. You're going to assume, hey, I better warm up. It's, might be really cold outside. I better warm up before I even dive into even the warm-up that's programmed for me. I'm going to go on the treadmill. I'm going to go on the bike. But no one's really writing that down or tracking it because it's almost like common sense that's what you would do. At Westside Barbell, those men and women that train there build up so much general physical preparedness. They do so much extra work that a lot of it wasn't even ever written down because it was just common sense. You want a bigger squat? You want a bigger deadlift? We're doing glute ham raises and we're doing the reverse hyper every single workout. So it was to the point where no one even tracked it or wrote it down anymore because it was as common as just throwing on a hip circle, as common as stretching out your hip flexors before you do a squat. So in your efforts to try to get stronger and with what you guys are trying to do, you should have some base level stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be those 2 exercises, but there should be things that you're attacking all the time. I would say glute ham raise, reverse hyper, 45 degree, those should be in every lower body workout. Otherwise, in my opinion, you don't really care that much about having a stronger squat or deadlift. They're that important. It's a huge mistake to be neglecting some of these exercises. I don't use those as much anymore because I don't fucking care anymore. I lifted my heaviest weights and I'm done with that for now. So if that's the goal and you want to be stronger, I really highly recommend that you have some base level lifts or base level exercises that are just always part of your regimen.
I think on top of that, preparing yourself physically, but it also starts to prepare yourself mentally. Every time that you come into the gym, you're dragging something else in with you. Life is going to bleed into the gym whether you like it or not. But having something that's kind of idiot-proof and you really don't have to think about going out there dragging the sled or walking with the hip circle or something that's going to start to put you in the right mindset. Every time you step in the gym, you should have an intent. What is your intent? What is the goal for today? What am I supposed to get done? That helps kind of start to focus you in, makes you mindful of that stuff, gets your body, your temperature up, gets you a little bit of hot and sweaty, and then you get to come into the gym, and then you can kind of move from there. So it actually really, it's things like that seem really, really small are going to be really, really big things for you. If you consistently do them all the time, it'll add up to something really, really big at the end.
Questions? There we go, white shirt.
For lockout problems, what accessory workouts can you do to help strengthen your hips?
This is the strongest guy at the seminar. He's asking us questions. We saw that 675 deadlift.
Did. So,
Looked easy.
There's a couple of different things to consider when we get a lockout question. Really kind of take a look at your form. If your form's kind of breaking down or something's going on, you got to take that into consideration, and then you kind of dress things off of it. For you, it really seems like you're getting to the top and you're almost locking your legs out a little bit too early, and then you're getting your hips through. So concentrating on pushing your legs through the lift for as long as you can, even though they may even be straightened, just to keep trying to get taller and straighter. That'll help you a lot. But things like Dimmel deadlifts are basically, you're going to take the bar up here, you're going to drop it down to about your knees and come back up and really work on squeezing your glutes. Did this just die? Yep.
Nope.
Oh, it's back now. Anything that's going to get your hips through at the top, whether it's kind of like some hip thrusters or something along those lines. I also think box squats are really, really good in this case because it's going to force you to really kind of open up your hips, and then it's going to give you a long distance to close, so you're going to have to really focus and work on squeezing and getting your hips through. If you don't pull sumo, I'd also start to pull sumo a little bit because it's going to help internal external rotation of your hips and help get everything kind of through and help you get those glutes through and extend at the top. And a lot of times, more than not, it's going to be a lot of ab work because people are going to kind of get a little droopy like so, and then it's going to seem like it's your lockout, but it's actually your posture as you kind of go. Does that help?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yep. Yeah.
Box squats?
Yep.
For the box squats, how low would you want to go?
I would start off whatever is going to be comfortable for you. I'm not going to tell you to go like an inch below parallel because that might negatively affect you like as you kind of go forward. So start a little bit higher. As long as you're feeling in your hips and your glutes, you're doing it right. And then you can kind of progress the box down and get a little bit more range of motion. And then you can kind of progress some weight, and then you can kind of progress the box a little bit lower as well. Play with those stances and, just really work on kind of sitting back, selling out, putting all of it into your hips and your hamstrings, and then trying to keep a vertical torso, and then really work on kind of slamming your hips to the top. Correct. You don't want to fall over while you're doing a box squat. You want to be up nice and tall, sit your butt back, pause, and it's going to be chest up and kind of go from there. That looks like the top of a deadlift, right? Right. So we don't necessarily always have to deadlift to deadlift more.
Remember also how you start is how you finish. So there could be some little missing piece at the bottom. You could be kind of messing something up or rushing something, or maybe you're not strong enough off the floor to keep the proper position in order to do the lift through the entire range of motion. So it's a really weird thing to think about, but a deficit deadlift could help maybe just as much as a partial range of motion deadlift. They both can be really important to your lockout, which you would think if I just start off of blocks or if I do like a rack pull, that's going to target my lockout. And yeah, it certainly is working that part, but you're still missing that bottom piece. And so doing the full range of motion is going to work your lockout as well and work your grip because you're holding on to the weight longer and you're forcing yourself to go through a worse position, a longer position. That also adds a lot of volume to your training. That's something that a lot of people don't factor in. The range of motion is going to have a big impact on you. So if you are to implement some deficit deadlifts, just realize that it's a great exercise, but they can be devastating because of the longer range of motion.
That good? Any other follow-ups? Anybody else want to add on to that or any other questions? What do we got? Yep.
When you're saying only deadlift heavy every 6 or 8 weeks, or however long you're saying, once every couple of months, what else are you doing in terms of max effort work to supplement? Are you saying don't deadlift heavy at all, or are you still doing block work heavy, deficits heavy, alternate stance heavy? Like, are you saying just not your competition lift heavy, or stay away from heavy period for a couple of months?
Well, that's going to, again, every situation is going to be a little bit different. But if you're asking me to program for you, here's what it's going to kind of look like. So we're going to rotate on a 2-week basis. We're going to go squat, deadlift, right? And those are going to be max effort moves. So you only get to deadlift twice a month.
Yeah.
Okay, heavy max effort work. One of those is going to be conventional. One of those is going to be sumo. Okay, and then from there we're going to rotate blocks, deficit, bands, free weight. Okay, so now we've just opened that door super, super wide as far as like what to do and where to kind of do it. So Mark mentioned it before is, we don't really actually practice the lift itself heavy very, very often. And it wouldn't be probably for 1 rep. It's going to be maybe 3 sets of 3, 5 sets of 5, something along those lines. And that's going to have a little bit of a variance to it as well, right? So we're going to practice our main deadlift stance lift once a week, but it's going to be dynamic and it's going to be in percentages from, like 40 to 70. So the max effort work when you're doing your squats, that could be close stance high bar stuff, box squatting into special bar, and you're going to rotate that sort of squat stuff. And then you're going to go 1 conventional, 1 sumo per month, and that's going to vary on deficit, block, bands, etc. So when I say max effort, I want you to go heavy for whatever that lift is of the day, right? And how many other reps I'm going to ask you to do. I'm not going to tell you to not go heavy and get stronger because that doesn't necessarily happen. But we're not going to pound our head into the wall by doing our competition lifts over and over and over again, doing the same thing, making the same misses, making the same mistakes over and over again. That's not going to get you stronger as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I kind of program it. Other people have different theories and philosophies on it, but this is the way that is going to go ahead and hopefully prepare you, make you the most well-rounded lifter, not only squat, deadlift, bench, but also conventional sumo as well. Because you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? If you can deadlift 700 pounds, but you can only conventional deadlift 400, that's embarrassing. That shouldn't happen. Now, if you can only conventional deadlift and you can't sumo because you don't have the mobility or you have something else going on, that's going to be understandable. But all things being equal, if you're going to be strong, everything needs to be strong.
Other questions?
Oh, God. Tiny, come on up.
Just also to be clear, when we're talking about the West Side Barbell Program, when you're utilizing the max effort method, at least the way that Louis has it prescribes, you're really going for it to the point where, you're not so sure on whether you can make the weight or not. At Jesse's gym, it's really helpful to have a coach there. He's there to watch and to keep an eye on you and make sure you don't get hurt. But as per the West Side method, these guys were really going for it. And the lifts, as you get stronger, they can really knock the crap out of you. We would go until our nose bled, or we'd go until we saw stars. And I think, in my opinion, I don't think that you can get out of it what you need to get out of it unless you're pushing yourself to that point. And if you're not at that point now, it might just be because you're still early on in your journey. But you'll have something great to look forward to. You'll eventually get there to the point where these lifts are really. Do you think that's true with what you've seen too? The lifts, it really has to knock the shit out of you. We've had a lot of people. They come in, they're all hyped up, and we work out 4 days a week, and they're like, "Oh, I'd love to do 5 or 6 days." It's once you start going through this, you're not going to want to. You're going to be cool with the 4 days, and you might even want an extra day off.
To kind of add on to that, the max effort days are going to really give us a clue and give us a look at what we need to work on. So I want you to go over 90% whatever that lift is, because it's going to reveal the breakdown in your form. Has anyone ever seen a 95% plus lift look really pretty? I haven't. It looks ugly, but it shows you what you need to work on. So that's also kind of the point of the max effort stuff. We want you to strain, we want you to work hard, we want you to dial up that intensity so when you need to go there, you can go there. But also, I want to see things get ugly and see things get bad. Not because I want you to get hurt, but because I want to fix what's wrong, and that's going to make you stronger as you keep going forward. So if you're not willing to push it to that point where things get a little ugly, the hole starts to close, things start to get black, all that other shit, it's going to be really, really hard to get you ever past that plateau. You need to be willing to kind of step over that line and let it be what it is, and then afterwards, as long as you're going to learn from those mistakes, you're going to get stronger and better as you go.
And maybe because you don't have a coach watching you, then always caution towards the lighter weight, and you'll end up with an extra set or two. It's not going to kill you. It's actually going to make you a lot stronger, and it'll make you a lot better. And so if you pick 245 instead of 275, you can learn from the 245, and now you can be like, oh shit, I thought I was going to be able to do 275. Maybe I should go to more 260, 265 and see how that works. Always take those little intermediate jumps first. Your training should be harder than competition anyway, and it's just going to get you more volume, and it's going to teach you more about where you're weak.
This is something that Mark and I have come into contact with so many different times. Whenever a lifter comes over and then, they just did 400, 4 plates, so 405, they look at you and they say, what do you think I should take? Well, what do you think you should take? And they say 455. Usually I go, okay, 455, so that's a 50-pound jump. You know what, let's take 425 or 430. I'm going to almost cut in half what you think you can do, tell you to put that on the bar. And then if you make it, cool, because we're going up there, right? But what does 50 pounds represent for a 400-pound deadlifter? That's over 10%. Does everybody realize that? What if that is 90%? Now you're 90% there. We're asking you to put 50 pounds on the bar. Now you're at 110%. You may be able to be strong enough to do that, but let's check. Let's see what 93, 94, 95% feels like. And if that still looks good, then we can kind of push it there. So if you're ever in doubt of what you should take, think greedy, cut it in half, and that's probably where you're going to go ahead and make your last lift.
Tiny tip, everybody.
Hey!
My question is, which one of us makes you want to go home during training more?
Well, I'm very lucky to get to coach all three of you, but you all three of me drive me crazy in each unique situations and ways. And I never want any of you to leave. But I wish.
That's a lie.
Now we know.
I don't ever really want you guys to leave, but if you guys could, make it a little bit easier on me, that'd be better. But what's really interesting about it is as they get stronger, they get to become more pains in the ass somehow. So it's gone. The level of frustration has gone up, but it's a pleasure to get to coach people like Sarah, Jeremy, and Tiff. They're all-time world record holders, top 3 in their weight class, across the board, all over the place. So you really can't complain about it. But it is one of those things where, it's amazing sometimes some of the stuff that people don't necessarily know or don't think about or don't really have an idea about sometimes. And that can be prior coaching, background, whatever it is. You can't, when you're dealing with people, you can't take anything really for granted, right? Like I couldn't take for granted that Tiff knew how she held the barbell, and that's one of those things, one of those small minutia things that she is just so focused and she's on such a different level that sometimes some of that stuff falls through the cracks. And if you're a good coach, you're going to be able to not only catch those things that are falling through, but also start to plug those holes before they even happen, like drawing left and right on her hand so she knows which is which, right? These are small things that can kind of add up to stuff. But if you are dealing with stuff, have patience, right? We talked about everybody having different learning styles and understanding things differently. And, people may not understand what's coming out of your mouth, or you may not understand what's coming out of somebody else's mouth. Don't think that it's wrong or you're wrong. You got to try and think about what they're trying to get across to you and how they're trying to get it across and how you can take that, implement it, and move forward. Because, everybody here, all the coaches, we're here to help. We want you guys to get better. This is something that, personally, that I have to do. This is just, I've been called to do this. This is my penance. I've been so lucky growing up to have such great mentors, parents, and coaches all along the way that I have to give back. I have to do this. If I don't, I'm not myself, and I feel horrible about it. So there are people out there like me, like Mark, who give their time over and over and over again. It's just about asking. I had the audacity to kind of get into this. One of the first people that I called was Louis Simmons and Dave Tate. And people are like, "You called them?" And I was just like, well, they're supposed to be the people to call, right? And then, I ended up getting, and that's how a lot of the things happened for me, is I just asked. I was like, hey, there's no powerlifting gyms out here. Who's out here? And then I started to meet some other people and went to a powerlifting gym, met Mark, and, things have kind of just gone from there. If I wouldn't have ever asked the question, I would never be here today. So there are people out there who want to help. There's 2 of them right here. So take advantage of it when and where you can, and understand the position that we're coming from and the position we're trying to get you guys to, and just be open to it, take what you can, and kind of run with it.
Yep. What you got?
Mark, you said there's 3 exercises you should be doing every day at the gym. This one and what are the other 2?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying there should be kind of some base level stuff that you do frequently, and it could be different for each person, but I was just giving the example at Westside Barbell. They did the reverse hyper and the 45-degree, or the reverse hyper and the glute ham raise. Not every gym always has a reverse hyper, so maybe for you it's a 45-degree back raise, but it could literally be anything. It could be, you always work on tricep push downs because you missed the bench lockout, or it could be any number of things that are just going to get a lot of blood to the area, maybe help with hypertrophy, and like Jesse said, it's just something that's going to benefit you to get your mind right for the day. You walk in and you try a couple curls with the dumbbells. Maybe that's part of your routine every time. Maybe you do some curls, maybe you do some shoulders, maybe do a little bit of triceps. It's just a circuit that you do. But you grab the 5s and they feel like 20s. And you're like, what's going on? Like, this is weird. You go to do a tricep push down and your elbow hurts, and you go to do something else and your shoulder's all weird, and you're supposed to have a max effort day that day. Well, now we can start to gauge, what's this day going to look like, and it's starting to sound like it may not look very good. And so not only are you getting in some extra work that can put you in better condition, it can put you in a better spot and set you up for success a lot better. Does anybody know how to get a PR every single time you step foot inside of a gym? Other than taking steroids or SARMs? Yeah, do something different. Try something new. Like, I'm going to try a 7-rep max on bench today with chains, close grip. And then you do it, and you're like, fuck yeah, that's awesome.
PR.
And that's how you win the invisible balloon for the day. You're gonna have a feel good, you're gonna feel good about the workout rather than like, oh man, like, it just wasn't in the cards today. I thought I was gonna be able to hit that 3-rep max, and you were 50 pounds off or something. So don't be afraid to make an audible in those warm-ups, but having, a couple things that you do to start every single training session. I know a couple friends that they have huge benches. They bench well over 600 pounds. And they've been doing, at the end of every workout, they just hit as many push-ups as they can at the end of every upper body workout. And it's like, is that coincidence? Like, why have I heard that multiple times from a bunch of guys that bench over 600? It's probably because that's actually doing something for them.
So anything that you want, really. So, I mean, get your hamstrings, glutes, and your legs fired up, and you should be good to go on a lower body day, on upper body day. Row something, some lat pulls, some presses, do some curls just because curls are awesome. And you should be ready to go. Just get, a little bit of hot and sweaty, catch a little bit of a pump. It's a way to kind of add and sneak in volume into things, really, really low, low weight volume, and just kind of get you going into the workout. I like to prescribe stuff where if I know someone isn't feeling something, like, hey, you need to get your lats tighter, really need to get your arms involved. I want to get a bunch of blood into that area so they're forced to feel what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Right? So, I mean, if you're like, hey, lats tight on your deadlift, what the hell does that mean? Go do 300 lat pull downs and come on over. You'll feel your lats when you're deadlifting, right? So it doesn't have to be 300, but 100 will suffice.
Yeah, and same thing with anyone that has like an injury. Your knees are jacked up, or your elbow or shoulder or something's jacked up. Do a ton of reps. Like, get a lot of blood into the area. If your shoulders are kind of junky, do 200 reps of lateral raises. Not in a row, because that might pull away from your actual training session for the day. But do that in between, maybe doing something for the rear delt or doing something for the rotator cuff, just to warm up for the day. Then your shoulders are ready. You'll feel more prepared when you start your workout. And same thing with the knee. Find something to figure out a way to get a bunch of blood in there so that your first movement, sometimes those first movements of the day when you first walk in and you go to do the movement, you're making this like angry face and you don't even have any weight on the bar. And it's like, well, that's a shitty signal to be sending to yourself. Your body posture, the faces that you make are really, really important to how you're going to lift for the day. And I'd rather see you with 315 with no facial expression at all. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see that, or smiling, right? I'd rather see that than to see someone, kind of smirking, because even those smirks, as weird as this all is, I've been training other people and training with people for a really long time. And so you start to develop these weird pet peeves when I'm like, does it really hurt that bad? Why is that guy got to make that face? Or why the fuck are they doing that? Like, go in deeper on yourself and be like, you know what? I'm just going to try to make this look super easy. So when someone else goes to do it, like the guy after me or the girl after me goes, they're dying and they're like, fuck. And they're in their head, they're like, how did he do that? How did he make that look so simple? That should be kind of the mindset. Make it more comfortable for yourself by lying to yourself. Any other questions? What we got? Gray hat.
Back to injury, basically lower back pain. For instance, myself, I have a football injury to my back. My back doesn't, until I get warmed up, my actual pain goes away. Is there ways to try to correct that?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if it's kind of a chronic injury, you've had it for a while, it may be something that, well, it's also going to depend on the injury and on the person. But I think you've already kind of found the recipe for success. You know, like if you're just warming up and getting moving and the pain starts to go away, just keep doing that. If the pain persists usually further past that, you know, maybe it's time to try and do something different. But you know, with chronic stuff like that, I would make sure that, you know, you do everything you can soft tissue wise with, you know, body work or anything that you might need to do first to make sure that that's okay and that you're allowed to kind of, or the doctor's cool with you moving and everything. But getting, oftentimes if you have a lower back injury, right, getting all the structures around that injury hot, ready to go is usually going to be the best way to kind of take care of it. So making sure that, you know, you have some lats going, make sure your glutes are on, make sure your hamstrings are on, make sure your quads are on. Because a lot of times back injuries, you're going to, you know, you end up getting left out in the cold, that back. You know what I mean? It's not warmed up enough. It's not necessarily your back can't take it. It's just that you're in a shitty position to kind of start with. So get all those structures, you know, kind of some blood in there, get moving, try and get in good positions, and that should kind of drift you further forward. And hopefully if you do it right, you know, it'll take less and less time to make it feel better. So maybe it takes you 3 exercises now. If you get the right kind of combo of exercises, it might only take you 1. Or maybe it takes you 15 minutes, now it's going to take you 5. So those are the progressions you're going to have. I don't know if your back pain will ever go away. It may be something that you have to deal with. But knowing how to, A, make it go away so you can train, and then B, knowing how to take care of it and get back to training faster, that's going to be about as good as it gets.
Dr. Stuart McGill has a lot of great information. You can look him up on YouTube. And then a simple exercise, there's one called a bird dog, and there's another one just a plank. Do you know, front plank, side plank. Get some sort of warm-up routine that's going to get a lot of blood to the area. Get you know, to work on strength training. I think a lot of times people have misconceptions about injuries, and I think they think because just they've heard the term, it's an overuse injury. Like, oh, it's an overuse injury. It's easy to say that, but really it's usually a weakness, you know. So for me, let's say my shoulders are shitty. Well, my shoulders would be shitty because I built up a lot of strength in the bench, and my external rotators are really weak or just really poor functioning in terms of like their mobility and stuff like that. So normally there's like a weak link in the chain somewhere. When you have pain, it's because something is like weak, something's not mobile enough. There could also just be potential that you flat out injured yourself. You may have like pulled something. But in any case, no matter what the case is, extra exercise and extra work is going to be the recipe. That's the ultimate RX for it. We got time for one more question.
Sorry, this may be an inconvenient last question, but for training high-level, like female strength athletes, do you take in consideration like the female hormone cycle for like testosterone and estrogen into their training and programming, and like injury prevention? And
Yes, I think that it's important to know. You may not necessarily need to share everything with your coach, but it's probably a good idea to realize that, like, hey, maybe I'm not going to have it this week or whatever it is, or maybe we don't need to necessarily push too hard, and kind of know the ebbs and flows of how you feel. One of the first things that I always ask people when they walk in the gym is, Jer, how you feeling? Yeah, so I'm probably not going to push him very, very far, right? I know he's going to give me an honest answer, and I know when people start to move. So that's when I can see people, you know, if I'm just like, man, you just look off. I was like, let's just cut you at 80% today. There's no use in going any further. And then there's sometimes people come in and say, okay, I feel kind of crappy, and then they're moving the bar. I'm like, no, that's all in your head. So, but if you know for sure, and there are people that I've worked with that have come from kind of a little bit more of a, you know, standardized progression, 3 weeks on, 1 week deload, 3 weeks on, 1 week deload, and they kind of come to a conjugate where we're going blast, blast, blast all the time. The deload is kind of built into our week, that we end up having to kind of push some volume off certain days of the week. So with, you know, kind of a female hormone cycle, that would be one of those times where we know that, you know, a couple of times, couple of sessions, you know, you're not going to necessarily be at your best. That doesn't mean that you can't make progress and you can't get better. Showing up, doing what you can, you know, I'm not going to ask for 100% that day, but I am going to ask for 80. You can do 80%. You can get a little bit more work in, right? And I mean, oftentimes getting better doesn't always necessarily mean a lift in the gym. That could be mobility, figuring something out on YouTube, watching something, listening to something motivational, trying to figure out something about yourself. But always getting better should be a goal, no matter what it is. As far as how to do that if you're programming for other people, I think having a good dialogue with your athletes is really, really important, and knowing, if it's a face-to-face thing, knowing what their face looks like, knowing when they're lying, because they're going to eventually lie to you and you'll catch them, know when maybe they're trying to, hang back, and also just kind of reading people's body language. They're going to tell you what their day's like when you walk in. You know what I mean? If you're hanging your head and you're walking in, your shoes aren't tied, and you're just kind of dragging your bag in, it's probably not a good sign. But if you come in, you sprint into the door, like, oh, today's going to be a good day for you. So having that sort of, thought process when you're dealing with people is really important. And that goes with, male, female, whomever. But it should be taken into consideration. But I kind of put that a little bit more on the athlete, where it's just like, hey, just be honest with me. How do you feel? Like shit. Okay, cool. Then let's dial it back. So as long as you have that ability to communicate kind of with your coach, I think then that's going to be that's the magic right there. One more.
Thanks. As far as being a coach and communicating with your athletes, maybe they don't communicate the same way. How do you go about giving them cues or tips on fixing something when they may be like someone who does they're better at picturing something or going through the movement or kinetic or so on.
Right. So I think it's important, as a coach, to understand how your athletes, not only how they're feeling, but also how they kind of learn and how you can kind of get through to them. I think there's so many people in this sport, unfortunately, that take kind of the hard-ass approach and just yell at people and hope that by screaming at you, you're going to lift this weight. And there's some people who can do that, who can take that in and turn it around and make it a positive thing. And there's some people who all they hear is that you're fucking yelling at them, and they hate it. And that could be for whatever reason. Let's not open that box, right? So you have to kind of understand how people are kind of going. But also, being a coach, you need to figure out ways to say the same thing differently over and over and over again. So in using words like, you got to get your knees out and chest up. Do you hear what I'm saying? Yes. Good, they're auditory. Now you have them. You know that you can say, do you hear me? And as long as you're talking to them and they understand your words, you got them. Like, hey, can you feel that you're straightening your leg out while you're doing that? Yeah, I really can. Cool. Now they got it. They're a little bit more kinesthetic, right? So, hey, do you see when I do this? I want you to do more like this. Oh, okay, cool. I get it now. Cool. They're visual, right? 3 different ways, saying the same thing to try and get the same result done. So as a coach, really encourage you to try and, go through and read on how people learn, right? And start to recognize who those people are. And it starts to break down really interestingly if you kind of do some research and you kind of read and you look at stuff. Like I said, a lot of athletes are not auditory, so they're going to be more visual and kinesthetic. So now you've automatically taken one out of there, and you can go ahead and focus on 1 or 2 right away. And you can go ahead and show and feel people kind of at the same time, or just develop a couple things like I just did, and just try and wrap those cues or those phrases around the cues that you're going to use or they need, and then kind of go from there. But, being sensitive and kind of taking the time to do it, they'll show you how they learn. They'll show you what they accept. They'll show you how they're going to take your criticism or take those cues. And whichever one works, or they're like, oh, yeah, I get it, stay on that one. Just stay on that one until it doesn't work anymore.
All right, that wraps it up.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Try to work on getting better, work on being better. The better that I got at powerlifting, the easier it was. First time I squatted over 1,000 pounds, I remember smiling halfway up because it felt easy, because I felt so prepared for it. What a cool feeling that is to feel that strong and that powerful in that moment when you're testing yourself. You too can feel that way. So really try to think about how can you be a better husband, a better daughter, a better son, try to be better to people. It's amazing how much crap there is out there and how much negativity that there really is out there. Try to be a little bit more welcoming to things that are positive, and try to be good to the person sitting next to you. Try to help people in the gym. I love the sport of powerlifting. I'll always love the sport of powerlifting. We need more people to participate. We need more people to be active in it. So you taking a couple seconds to show someone something on a bench press could potentially start them down the path of going to a powerlifting meet. Try to go to powerlifting meets yourself if you've never been to one before. Offer your time, offer your help if you can, because whenever it's time for a powerlifting meet, not around here because we have a good team that understands the game here, but sometimes when you run a powerlifting meet, it's kind of hard to find people to help. So really, do the best you can to try to support this sport that we all really love and have a lot of passion for it. It's easy just to kind of say like, oh yeah, like I love the sport, but do you really? Are you putting extra time in? Are you putting in the effort that's really necessary? But just realize that each and every day, much like each and every day in the gym, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to get better. So rather than looking at how much hard work is ahead of you, look at how much opportunity is out in front of you. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Thank you all for coming.